I didn't even hear the tow truck. That's the part that haunts me. One minute I was brushing my teeth, thinking about whether to drop pan-fry my chicken, and the next minute I'm sprinting down my driveway barefoot in pajama pants, screaming at a tow truck hauling away my brand new Ford F-150 like it was a stolen shopping cart. The driver looked back once, gave me a shrug that said, "Not my problem," and kept going. I stood there, heart pounding, trying to figure out what the hell just happened until she walked out. Karen Winnow. Pink bathrobe, wine glass at 8 a.m., and that smug smile that made me want to eat gravel. She raised her glass to me like we were at brunch and said, "You really should have read the HOA manual, sweetheart." That's when I realized I wasn't just living in a neighborhood. I had just moved into Karen Winnow's personal kingdom. I moved into Fox Ridge Estates with the naive optimism of a guy who just signed a 30-year mortgage on his dream house. For bedrooms, a decent lawn, and a driveway wide enough for both my car and my pride and joy truck. I'd spent the last 6 years saving up for that truck. Custom black rims, cherry red paint job, and the engine purred like a jungle cat. But apparently, in Fox Ridge Estates, my truck was an abomination, a commercial eyesore, as described in a single-spaced, laminated letter taped to my door the very next morning after I moved in. At first, I laughed. I thought it was a prank. Turns out, it was an official violation notice from the Homeowners Association, signed in blue ink by none other than Karen Winnow, HOA president, supreme dictator of suburbia. I first met Karen the day I moved in. She was waiting on my front porch with a welcome basket that had a jar of handmade lavender foot scrub and a 37-page HOA guideline book with color-coded tabs. She smiled too wide and blinked too little. Her dog, a yappy Pomeranian named Mr. Tinkles, peed on my doormat while she explained how my mailbox was 2 inches too tall. I tried to be polite. I really did. I even offered her a soda from my moving cooler, which she declined because, and I quote, "Carbonation gives me frown lines." The letter about my truck was the first sign this woman was going to be a problem. I called the number on the notice and got a voicemail that just said, "This line does not accept messages." So, like any normal human being, I ignored it. That was my mistake. 2 days later, my truck was gone. Not stolen, towed from my own damn driveway. The towing company said the request came directly from the HOA. I argued. They said talk to the board. The board? I didn't know any board. I didn't vote for any board. Turns out, the HOA board had a grand total of 3 people: Karen Winnow, Karen's best friend Donna, who only spoke in whisper shouts, and Karen's 19-year-old son Chad, who didn't even live there but attended meetings via Zoom. When I confronted Karen, she didn't even blink. She told me I was breaking HOA Rule 14.2b, subsection 3. No vehicles with visible toolboxes, lifts, decals, or non-standard wheels shall be parked in any driveway visible from the street. I asked her where I was supposed to park it, on the roof? She told me I could apply for a garage exception review, which she clarified only applied to homes with 3-car garages. Mine had 2. Her face was a smug museum of fake sympathy. So, I paid the $300 to get my truck out of impound, and the next day I found another letter taped to my door. This one, a $75 fine for hostile confrontation with an HA officer. I laughed so hard I nearly cracked a rib. Then I sat on the tailgate of my now garage-stuffed truck and realized something. I had just stepped into the plot of a bad sitcom, but this wasn't going to end in a laugh track. This was war. I started digging. Not in my yard. That would have triggered a landscaping violation, but into Karen Winnow's world. It didn't take long to find the cracks. Her ex-husband had left 2 years ago and moved to Costa Rica. She blamed it on his midlife crisis, but the guy wrote a blog called How My Wife Ruined Retirement. Her son Chad had been kicked off his college campus for organizing a protest against cafeteria kale. And that shed in her backyard? Totally illegal per HOA guidelines. Too close to the fence, painted the wrong shade of beige, and constructed without approval. Oh, Karen, you hypocritical hydrangea. But I wasn't ready to strike yet. No, I needed allies. People who'd also suffered under her rule. That's when I met Janice, who got fined for letting her daughter draw chalk hearts on their driveway, and Mr. Garrison, a Vietnam vet who got written up for flying an American flag larger than regulation size. And Miguel, a teenage tech wizard whose drone footage of Karen yelling at the mailman was better than any movie trailer I'd ever seen. Together, we started to plan. Not just petty pranks, though those came later, but something bigger, something bold. Because if Karen thought she could tow my truck from my own driveway and walk away unscathed, she had another thing coming. She messed with the wrong homeowner, and she had no idea that the next thing I was going to tow was her entire life. It was time to pull the weeds. The thing about petty dictators is they never expect rebellion. Karen Winnow thought she had squashed me with a flick of her HOA wand, as if I was just another non-compliant gnome on her perfectly trimmed lawn. But what she didn't know was that her little stunt had activated a switch in me, the same switch that helped me survive a toxic startup job and an ex who labeled my spice rack overly masculine. So, while Karen sipped Chardonnay from her rose-themed wine glass and monitored the neighborhood like a hawk with a superiority complex, I was quietly assembling an alliance. It started with Mr. Garrison. He lived 2 doors down and had this old, slightly faded marine flag hanging over his garage. Karen had fined him $150 last year for aggressive patriotism. When I knocked on his door and said, "I heard Karen's been giving you trouble too," he didn't even respond. He just turned around, grabbed a folding chair, and said, "Let's talk strategy." That's how serious things were. Next came Janice. Single mom, 3 kids, work nights. Karen fined her for sidewalk chalk. I wish I were joking. Janice had been trying to keep her kids occupied during summer break, and her youngest had drawn a unicorn on the driveway. Karen called it visual pollution. I found her pulling weeds one afternoon and told her I was building something to push back. She laughed, dropped her gloves, and said, "Count me in. But just know, I don't play fair." Then there was Miguel, 17, genius-level coder, and the neighborhood's unofficial drone pilot. Karen had reported him to the police for aerial harassment when his drone accidentally flew over her backyard. He got off with a warning, but Karen labeled him a domestic surveillance threat at the next HOA meeting. When I mentioned I needed help looking into HOA documents, he said, "You want blueprints? Meeting logs? Karen's Amazon order history? Give me an hour." We called ourselves the Underground Ordinance, which sounded dramatic, but we were feeling theatrical. Besides, if Karen wanted to run the neighborhood like a kingdom, we were going to be the resistance. Our first goal was simple: find something she cared about more than power and hit it. That something turned out to be her rose garden. Now, I'd noticed it before, of course. It was impossible not to. Her front yard looked like a romantic movie set. Rows of imported hybrid tea roses, hand-trellised climbing vines, and one very ornate water feature shaped like an angel crying into a birdbath. The garden was her pride and joy. Every morning she would be out there in a wide-brimmed hat, pruning shears in hand, whispering to the petals like they were her children. But here's the thing. Something about the garden felt off. It was too big. It spilled past her fence, over the property line, and into what looked like common HOA green space. Miguel pulled zoning maps from the county records office, and there it was in black and white. Half of Karen's precious rose garden wasn't even on her property. It was on shared HOA land. Technically, that land was open to use by any HOA member for community benefit, provided they applied for it. Karen had never filed a single application. The opportunity was too good. I took the info to Mr. Garrison, who started cackling like a man who just found out his ex owed him alimony. Janice suggested we file for a community beautification lease and repurpose the land. I asked her what she had in mind, and she grinned. A parking lot. For trucks only. I almost cried. Of course, it wasn't going to be that easy. Karen Winnow still controlled the HOA board. If we wanted to officially apply to use that land, we'd need to bring it up at a meeting and survive whatever bureaucratic nonsense she tried to throw in our path. That's where the real plan began. I called up my new secret weapon, Harold Livingston, 82 years old, sharp as a tack, and the former HOA president before Karen staged what he called a soft coup. She'd pushed him out using a flurry of fake complaints about his unpainted shutters. Harold had been waiting years for revenge. He showed up at my house in a golf cart with a stack of bylaws, case studies, and a mug that read "Democracy Dies in Darkness." We spent hours combing through the HOA charter, finding loopholes, buried clauses, and obscure homeowner rights Karen had either ignored or rewritten without a vote. What we discovered was gold. The communal land clause, buried in Section 11.4c, allowed for member-led proposals as long as the applicants were in good standing and the proposal served a shared communal benefit. Harold helped me draft the paperwork. Miguel designed a mock-up plan with drone images. We called it Community Green Access Enhancement, which sounded nice and neutral, but we all knew what it really meant. Karen got the letter 2 days later. I made sure it was printed on thick, professional stationery and hand-delivered. She read it in her driveway while I stood there smiling. Her eyes scanned the document, and then she looked up at me like she just realized the rat she thought she trapped was holding the cheese and the deed to the trap. She didn't say a word, just folded the paper in half and went back inside. That night, she sent out an emergency HOA meeting notice. Mandatory attendance, no proxies allowed. I could practically hear her typing the email with the fury of 1,000 suburban suns. The stage was set. All we had to do now was survive the meeting and get the vote. It wouldn't be easy. Karen wasn't the type to go down without a meltdown. But we weren't scared anymore. Because this wasn't just about a truck or a garden or a set of absurd rules. This was about taking our neighborhood back from someone who thought flowers gave her the right to rule people. She took my truck. Now I was going to take her roses, petal by petal, root by root. And when it was over, she'd wish she'd just let me park in peace. The HOA meeting was held in the community center, which looked like a cross between a daycare and a courtroom from a low-budget legal drama. Fluorescent lights flickered above us, casting an eerie glow over the rows of folding chairs and the dusty fake plants lining the walls. Karen stood at the front, behind a long plastic table covered in printed agendas, a bell she never rang, and a pitcher of lemon water she refused to share. She wore her signature pink blazer, the kind of outfit someone puts on when they want to look professional but intimidating. Her expression said she was ready for war. I walked in with Harold, Janice, Mr. Garrison, and Miguel. The rest of the neighborhood trickled in, some curious, some annoyed, and a few clutching copies of the viral video of Karen screaming at a pizza guy last week that Miguel may or may not have leaked. Karen banged the bell twice. "Let's come to order," she said. "We have a very serious matter on the agenda tonight regarding unauthorized land use and a proposed misuse of community property." She didn't even look at me. I smiled and waited for my turn. She went through 5 other items first, none of them urgent. She was stalling. Someone had replaced their shutters with a darker brown than regulation permitted. A teenager was skateboarding past the speed limit. Someone had planted unapproved tulips. It was HOA theater, and the audience was barely staying awake. Finally, she got to item 6, our proposal. I stood up, cleared my throat, and began. As outlined in Section 11.4c of the HOA Charter, any community member in good standing may propose a beneficial use of shared HOA land. We are submitting a formal application to repurpose a portion of the green space, currently misused as private garden property, into a functional parking area for large vehicles in response to multiple towing incidents that have impacted homeowners. I handed out copies of the proposal with maps and zoning info attached. Karen looked like she was chewing on lemon rind. She tried to cut me off. That land is part of an established beautification effort, approved years ago. Harold interjected from his seat. No such approval exists in meeting records, and no vote was ever recorded. That space was co-opted by you without board review. Karen's mouth twitched. With all due respect, Harold, you're no longer on this board. Harold smiled like a man with a loaded cannon. With all due respect, Karen, you've broken 12 charter rules in the past 6 months, including Article 9.2a, unauthorized personal modifications of communal property. The room stirred. People looked at each other. Some whispered. Karen stood there, caught in the crossfire between past and present, her authority thinning with every second. She tried to pivot. This proposal is not in the spirit of our neighborhood. We value aesthetics, harmony, floral vibrance. Janice stood. My daughter drew a unicorn with sidewalk chalk, and you fine me $50. You think a unicorn disrupts harmony, but your illegal garden doesn't. A few people laughed. Karen shot her a glare that could curdle milk. Miguel stepped up next. I've also brought video documentation. Aerial footage shows the rose garden extending over property lines. That land is technically designated as shared green space, which means it doesn't belong to anyone. It belongs to all of us. He pulled up a projection of the drone footage. Karen's prized roses were clearly crossing into unmarked public space. Her little kingdom had overstepped its border. She knew it. We all saw it. The room was silent for a moment. Then someone clapped. Then 2 more. Then the room. Karen tried one last move. This is a targeted campaign to humiliate me. Personal vendetta is not a valid reason for change. I looked her right in the eye. You towed my truck from my own driveway, then fined me for reacting to it. This isn't personal. It's proportional. She sat down, jaw clenched. The vote was called. All HOA members present could vote. The motion to repurpose the land passed with overwhelming support. Karen's face fell like a deflated balloon. Chad tried to vote against it via Zoom, but the signal conveniently dropped. 2 weeks later, demolition began. I woke up early, brewed a fresh pot of coffee, and watched the bulldozer roll down the street like a tank of justice. Karen stood on her lawn, wrapped in a floral robe, wine glass already in hand at 8 a.m. again. This time, she didn't toast me. She just stared, as if her roses might grow legs and run away. The bulldozer operator gave me a thumbs up. I nodded back. The engine roared. The roses didn't stand a chance. It was chaos in slow motion, petals flying like confetti, dirt turning over like the earth itself had had enough. The angel statue cracked in half. Mr. Tinkles barked from inside the house like he knew his empire was falling. Karen screamed, loud and long, running down the walkway and begging the operator to stop. "Those are my babies," she cried. Miguel filmed the whole thing from his drone. We edited the footage, added dramatic music, and uploaded it with the title Karen versus the Bulldozer, a parking lot story. It went viral in under 24 hours. By evening, the entire internet knew about Fox Ridge Estates. People debated whether Karen's meltdown was Oscar-worthy or just deeply satisfying. Memes exploded. One had her face photoshopped onto the Statue of Liberty, crying while holding a rose instead of a torch. Another called her the last queen of HOA land. It was everything I didn't know I needed. But it didn't stop there. The backlash hit hard. Local news came out for interviews. The city planning department received multiple requests to review HOA abuse cases. A couple of Karen's former friends quietly resigned from the board. Her wine club revoked her membership. And worst of all for her, someone from the regional HOA council started sniffing around about misuse of funds. Meanwhile, we paved the area, properly lined it, sealed it, and added signage. Community parking, oversized vehicles welcome. We even left a small corner undeveloped and planted a single rose bush there. A tiny plaque read, "In memory of former landscaping. Karen's Corner." Karen stopped tending her front yard. The grass grew wild. Mr. Tinkles vanished from view. The once pristine house now had a loose shutter flapping in the wind. I knew she'd been broken in the one place she thought she was untouchable. And me? I parked my truck in the new lot, walked back to my driveway, and looked up at the sky. It was clear, quiet, peaceful. I never imagined a war over roses and rules could bring people together, but it had. And Karen, once queen of the block, was just another neighbor. A quiet one, for now. For a while, it felt like peace had returned to the neighborhood. People waved again. Kids played on the sidewalk without being told their laughter was decibel disruptive. Even the air seemed lighter, like the whole block had exhaled. Karen stayed inside mostly, blinds drawn, her once vibrant garden now a memory paved over by communal asphalt. I figured she'd taken the loss and gone into hiding, licking her wounds and reorganizing her sock drawer alphabetically. But I underestimated her. Karen wasn't the type to go down without one final act of suburban vengeance. The only problem was, she was out of power, out of roses, and out of allies. All she had left was desperation, and that was a dangerous thing. It started with a letter, not the usual laminated, overly official HOA fine. This one was handwritten and oddly polite. It read, "I would like to schedule a meeting to discuss neighborhood restoration and unity. Regards, Karen." I stared at it like it might explode. Then I laughed. Unity? This woman once tried to report a 9-year-old for setting up a lemonade stand without a permit. Still, curiosity got the better of me. I agreed to meet her, publicly of course. We sat on opposite ends of the community center bench like two generals negotiating a ceasefire. She was dressed differently, less lobbyist politician, more retired librarian. Her hair was tied back, makeup minimal, and her voice lacked that usual syrupy authority. She said she wanted to make peace, that she recognized she'd let things get out of hand. She even apologized for the tow truck, the fines, the misunderstandings. And for a second, I believed her, until she said, perhaps, in the spirit of healing, we could revisit the idea of shared use of the parking space, maybe bring back some greenery, roses even. And there it was, the hook. She hadn't changed. She was just repackaging herself, rebranding. I told her politely but firmly that the space was staying the way it was, voted on, approved, and legally sealed. She gave me a tight smile and said, "Well then, I suppose I'll see you at the next election." I left that meeting knowing we weren't done yet, not by a long shot. Sure enough, the signs started appearing. Literally, flyers taped to mailboxes and stop signs announcing a special HOA election. Karen was running again, pushing a restoration and respect campaign. She talked about reclaiming the neighborhood's charm, undoing the chaos, and bringing back what she called civilized standards. The flyers showed her standing in front of a digitally restored rose garden, hands clasped like a benevolent queen returning from exile. The woman had the nerve to promise unity while threatening to uproot everything we built. But this time, we were ready. I decided to run too, not because I wanted the power, but because I couldn't let her slither back onto that throne. We organized meetups, printed flyers of our own, this time with real photos, real neighbors, and a tagline: community over control. Miguel helped build a simple campaign website. Janice designed t-shirts. Mr. Garrison insisted on giving a speech, and we let him, even though he opened it by shouting. She tried to find me for singing the national anthem in my garage. We held an open forum at the rec center. Karen came armed with printouts, her voice firm but coated in false humility. She claimed her time away had given her perspective, that the HOA needed moral structure again. I got up and simply said, if structure means telling kids they can't draw on their driveways or towing cars parked on private property, maybe it's time for a new blueprint. The crowd clapped loudly. That was the moment I knew the tide had shifted. Election day came with more drama than a season finale. Karen tried to disqualify several voters by citing unpaid dues, which turned out to be a lie. Miguel had already pulled the records. Chad, her son, tried to shout something from the back of the room, but someone hit play on the video of Karen crying in her front yard, and that was the end of him. When the votes were counted, it wasn't even close. I won with 73%. Karen left the meeting without a word, her campaign posters already curling at the edges like dried leaves. My first act as HOA president was simple: repeal the Karen rules. We removed 28 absurd regulations, from curtain color restrictions to grass blade height. We replaced them with a short, clear, reasonable code of conduct. People celebrated by painting their mailboxes fun colors and hosting a barbecue in the newly designated Karen's Corner parking lot. The mood was light, free, playful. For the first time, this neighborhood felt like home. But Karen still wasn't done. The final straw came late one night when Miguel's motion sensors picked up activity in the community lot. The footage showed Karen in black clothes and gloves, creeping around the parking lot with a pair of wire cutters. She cut the power to the solar lights and then tried to spray paint over the new community sign. What she didn't know was that Miguel had installed hidden cameras powered by backup batteries. The footage was crisp, clear, and undeniably her. We called the cops. They showed up at her house at 7 a.m., right as she was stepping outside with Mr. Tinkles for what was likely going to be her last smug neighborhood stroll. She was charged with trespassing and vandalism. The story hit local news again. Karen Winnow, former HOA president, arrested for sabotaging a parking lot named after herself. It was almost poetic. After that, she disappeared. Her house went up for sale with the listing. Charming two-story in a friendly, vibrant community. No mention of the firestorm she had caused. The roses didn't come back. Neither did the fines, the flyers, or the laminated warnings. Karen was gone, but the impact remained, not in a bitter way, but in a way that reminded everyone that we could make something better out of the mess, together. I didn't want to run the HOA forever. I knew that going in, but I needed to be the one to end her reign, and to make sure no one ever tried to rule this block like it was a personal kingdom again. We were neighbors, not subjects. And now, for the first time in a long time, we were actually acting like it. The silence in the neighborhood after Karen moved out was almost unsettling. For so long, her presence had been like background static, always there, humming with rules and regulations like a ticking time bomb made of floral-scented passive aggression. But now her windows were dark, the shutters unpainted, and her once manicured lawn had grown wild and indifferent. Up for sale sign leaned slightly to the left in her yard, and someone had scrolled "Free Tyrant Inside" on the back of it in sidewalk chalk. No one bothered to clean it up. Honestly, it became a bit of a landmark. Without Karen's looming gaze, the neighborhood changed in small but meaningful ways. People started talking more. Lawns got a little messier in the best way. Lawn flamingos popped up on corners. A small herb garden appeared next to the basketball court. Someone even painted their garage door like a mural of a sunset with birds flying over a beach. It probably would have given Karen an aneurysm, but now it just made people smile. The community parking lot, once the battlefield of suburban warfare, became something entirely new. Kids rode their bikes in circles around it. Neighbors hosted food truck Fridays with local vendors. One night, someone wheeled out a projector and played old movies against the white back wall of the HOA office. I parked my truck there every night with pride. The once unsightly commercial vehicle was now something of a neighborhood mascot. People even left little sticky notes on the windshield. One read, "Thank you for the freedom." Another just had a smiley face and a tiny drawn rose with an X through it. I took the rental income from the parking lot, modest but steady, and invested it right back into the block. We added benches, solar-powered lights, and a little playground slide for the kids. But the final touch was my favorite. In the corner where Karen's most prized roses used to grow, we planted a single bush, just one. The plaque beneath it read, "Karen, may she rest in petals." It was the only thing we left in her honor. It was poetic, ironic, and surprisingly popular for selfies. Miguel ended up turning his drone footage and HOA hacks into a YouTube channel he called Codebreaker Chronicles. The Karen saga became a multi-part miniseries titled Tyranny in Tulips. It went viral, especially the part where she yelled at the bulldozer like it had stolen her purse. People couldn't get enough of her breakdown. He made limited edition merch, t-shirts with her crying face, and the caption, "My babies," sold out in 2 days. He used the profits to buy a new drone and a surprisingly good audio system for the community center, which now doubled as a place for open mic nights and neighborhood trivia tournaments. Janice started a newsletter called The Real Foxridge Report. It was equal parts news, gossip, and humor. She let her kids run the comic strip at the end, which often featured a fictional villain named Queen Thorn. Everyone knew it was Karen. Everyone loved it. Mr. Garrison finally got to fly a full-size American flag across his garage, and no one batted an eye. He also started a weekly barbecue tradition on Sundays, complete with country music and grilled corn. Turns out, he made a legendary brisket. For the first time, people weren't just living next to each other. They were living with each other. It felt less like a suburb and more like a village, not the kind with pitchforks and HOA dragons, but the kind where you actually care if your neighbor's kid scrapes their knee or needs help changing a tire. As for me, I only stayed on as HOA president for 1 year. That was enough. I didn't want to become what I fought against. I passed the baton to Harold, who ran unopposed, and I took a step back. I still attended meetings, but now I brought snacks instead of petitions. I even started keeping a tiny herb garden on my windowsill, something Karen once called aesthetically disjointed. The thyme and basil never tasted better. Every now and then, a new neighbor would move in and ask about the infamous Karen incident. Someone would always tell the story, embellishing a little more each time. In one version, Karen tried to chain herself to the garden. In another, she sent a cease and desist to a squirrel. No matter the version, it always ended the same way, with a truck, a bulldozer, and a rose bush turned into a parking lot. But it wasn't just about revenge or going viral. That story became a legend because it reminded people that no one should be allowed to rule others through fear or technicalities, that communities should be built on respect, not control, that rules should serve people, not strangle them, and that sometimes justice comes not with a gavel, but with a lawn chair, a drone, and a well-timed petition. The funniest part? After everything, after the towing and the fines and the destruction of the suburban monarchy, I realized something. I didn't even like roses. I always thought they were kind of overrated, prickly, high maintenance, a symbol of perfection that no one asked for. But that last bush in the corner, the one we left standing for Karen? Every time I walked past it, I smiled. Not because I missed her, but because that bush reminded me that even the most controlling, overbearing presence can be reduced to a corner decoration if people stand up together. We never heard from her again. Rumor had it she moved to a new development on the other side of town, somewhere with a stricter HOA and a better climate for hydrangeas. Someone said she tried to start fresh, rebrand herself as a concerned community enthusiast. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But here, this was home now. A real home. Not a manicured prison with perfect hedges and laminated warnings, but a place where people could laugh too loud, paint too bright, and park wherever the hell they wanted without fear of being towed for living their lives. So yeah, she took my truck once, but in the end, I got the neighborhood. And the neighborhood got itself back. Funny how things work out.